Hi everyone, thanks for joining me for this card making video. I wanted to show you how I made these cute little cards. I made a whole bunch of them and wanted to make a few more and had some feedback, but I have a few subscribers who don't scrapbook, who are card makers, so I thought it was about time I made a card making video. So how these cards came about was that I needed to make a bunch of thank you cards, and I really liked some wrapping paper that I received as a gift and thought that these animals were really cute, and I hated to throw the wrapping paper out, so I thought I would upcycle them into a bunch of cards. So what I did is I pre-cut those animals out of that cardstock, or out of the wrapping paper, and just left a little bit of a white border around the edge, so just roughly cut them. And now I've got a piece of chipboard here that I'm just covering in PVA glue, just spreading that out. I've been generous, but spreading it out as thinly as possible, so I'm just trying to get a smooth finish there. And got a bunch of these animals cut out that I'm going to stick down to the cardstock. So this idea came about a while ago from some YouTube videos that I watched about creating your own flair, and thought, why can't it be done to create my own chipboard embellishment? So this is how it all came about. So I'm just sticking down those animals there. One of the things I would say is, because it's quite a glossy, heavy weighted wrapping paper, the edges did tend to curl up a little bit, so you do have to go back as it's drying and kind of push it down. But I did these the night before I attempted to make the cards. I sort of stuck a whole bunch of these down, and so did go back to them sort of 10-15 minutes after I'd done it, and just push the edges down again. You can see me doing that, making sure they're sticking down now. But because there's glue all over it, you can't just put a weight on it and hold it down. So just sticking those down there, but there was one, I actually had one from previous, so you don't have to wait for these to dry. I'll just pop those off to the side and grab the ones that I've already stuck down and have dried. So I've got that I'm pulling into camera now, so I've got a little line there that I'm going to use, and you can see it's dried really well. And so I'm going to use a large pair of scissors to trim the edges and leave the detail for a smaller pair of scissors. So one of the things I did find the first time I made them was I used quite a light sort of chipboard, so almost like a grunge board texture, and it was quite easy to cut them out with a small pair of scissors and get the detail. But with this chipboard that I grabbed, just grabbed a whole bunch out of my scraps, it was a lot more heavy weighted and was quite difficult to cut with the little scissors, so I found it easier to use my big scissors and then just go back in with the little scissors and get some of the detail. So I did leave a little white border around the edge. I find it's a little bit more forgiving when it comes to trimming, fussy cutting things out. And it also allowed me to leave some gaps near the lion's tail and between his legs that were quite small, and not actually cut those out. Whereas if I had trimmed right around the edge, it would have looked silly if there was some white gaps somewhere, but not white gaps everywhere else. So you can see I've just got one that I've finished cutting out, so you don't have to watch me cut the whole thing. And I'll use that one. So just now grabbing my cardstock, I just chose, I've got a white C5 card, and I've cut a mat from dark blue cardstock that will give a small border around. And I've also used my nestability dies. You can see I'm showing you there, just cut a scallop circle out of the dark blue cardstock and a circle that just fits inside that out of white cardstock. So I've got myself a background stamp here, and I'm using archival ink in cornflower blue. And I've got the chevron as a background, but you could use any background stamp that you like. I just think the chevron's quite cute with children themed things. So just stamping that down, and I was quite haphazard with the ink because I wanted it to have that little bit of a rustic look, so bits and pieces missing, and you can see there's a few sort of gaps there, but you can see the pattern overall. So just stamping that down, I'll clean up my stamp before I move on. Just much easier to clean it up as you go. So what I also want to do is add a white piece of cardstock to this blue cardstock. So there's a little bit of a blue border, and that's all you can see. The cheapest way of doing this, rather than having to measure it out, is looking at how much border I want, and then I slide it to double it. And then what I'll do is I'll flip over that cardstock to the other side and trim it. So rather than measuring, which is probably the correct way to do it, I tend to take the lazy way, and I find this technique tends to work quite well. If I don't have my trimmer on my desk at the time, or I don't have my cutting mat down, this tends to be how I might operate from time to time. I'm not very good at cutting straight lines, but if I know I've already got the mat that is straight, I'm pretty okay at trimming using that mat as an edge. So just adding some double-sided tape to both the white cardstock and the blue mat that I'll be using as well. And one thing I would say is, if you were making a bunch of cards in one go, is to do all the steps at one time. So cut all your circles, do all your stamping, add all your double-sided adhesive to everything in one go. Just find it works a lot quicker. So I think I made around about 10 or so cards, and it probably took me, minus the drying time for the embellishments that I use on the top of the card, probably took me maybe an hour to an hour and a half to make all of those cards, because I did sort of do it as a bit of a production line. And my daughter was there to help, so she added the adhesive to the back of a few of the embellishments and things like that. So that came in handy as well. So I'm just about to adhere the white cardstock down to the blue cardstock, and just moving that off to the side there. It's like I adhere it, but I don't. I think I put the tape on it, but I didn't stick it down. And that's what I was saying, I put all the double-sided tape on to everything in one go, so I didn't have to come back and grab the double-sided tape again. So just adhering that white cardstock to the blue cardstock, and you'll see that it gives me that nice skinny border that I was looking for quite well. So fairly even. I knew the blue cardstock was straight, so it was easy to use that as a guide. And I'm just grabbing some ribbon here, and I'm not very good at tying ribbon, so this technique really works well for me, where you actually just fold it over, make a circle, and tie the ribbon while it's still on the reel. And I did roughly measure how much ribbon I would need. I don't tend to tie bows, so I just trim that off, and I've got myself a circle, and I trim the circle. And what that does is that creates a tied up piece of ribbon that I can then wrap around the back. I find that tying around the cardstock tends to get a bit fiddly, and I can never get it quite tight enough. So using this technique and wrapping it around the back of the cardstock really works for me. You would have seen me fold half of the double-sided tape up and just stick down the ribbon to where I've moved that double-sided tape. It wouldn't hold very well, if that was your final layer, but because I'm going to stick this blue cardstock to our actual card base, it tends to hold it in place quite well, and you're hiding that messy bit at the back anyway. So just adhering that down to our card now, and you can see I've got a nice border there, and then I'm just going to trim that ribbon off so it looks quite neat and fits within the card. I do tend to have more ribbon than I need because it's always easier to trim some off as opposed to adding more on. So just now adhering that circle onto that scallop circle, just using double-sided tape, and then I'm going to use foam adhesive to mount that circle onto the card, so just giving it a little bit of dimension. I find that you could use foam squares, but I find that the foam adhesive is much easier and less fiddly when you have a larger piece that you want to adhere. So just adding that now, And then what I'll do is add that lion to the middle of that circle. So with the lion, I did actually use foam squares because I didn't want it to have as much dimension, and I have these foam squares that are quite thin, and so yeah, that's why I used the foam squares on the lion. And just adhering that down now. So that's looking pretty good. I'm happy with where that is, and I'm just looking for a sentiment now. So being a thank you card, I've got this thank you sentiment, and I've got a piece of white cardstock off to the left there, and I'm just stamping that, inking up that stamp with the same ink that I used before. You could use black ink if you wanted to. I just decided to use a coordinating coloured ink, and I think it says with thanks. So I'm just trimming that now, and just cutting that down because I'm going to mat that onto some blue cardstock as well, just to give a bit of interest. You could just ink the edges if you wanted to, and I'm just giving it a little fishtail banner on one side as well. So I'll do that, and then I will use double-sided tape to adhere that to the blue cardstock, and then trim a border for that as well. So I find that this is a great technique for using pattern papers. You could do it with anything that you thought had a really cute motif, and it wasn't kind of thick enough to use as an embellishment. You could do this for scrapbooking pages as well. So I did some extra animals that I thought might work well on a scrapbooking page, like a visit to the zoo or something like that. But you could do it for absolutely any images that you really like. Printables would be another great option. So often when you print, you can't print on chipboard. So you know, being able to either print it on normal paper and stick it down, or print it on cardstock and stick it to something a bit thicker, would work quite well to make embellishments for either cards or scrapbooking pages. And because you can print as many as you like, they can coordinate for a page or a bunch of cards that you might be making. So just trimming that down now, and then I'll use some foam tape to adhere that to the cards so that each of those different coloured cardstocks sit at the same level. So the blue behind the banner sits at the same level as the scalloped blue circle, and then the white cardstock that sits on top is just sitting directly on top of that. So just adhering that down, and then what I'll do is I'll pull out the rest of the card so you can see a whole bunch of them together. And I've just done different orientations, put the ribbon in a different spot, put the sentiment in a different spot, use different colours, and they all sort of match and coordinate, but they're all slightly different as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Let me know if you'd like to see more card making videos, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe to my channel. Thanks again for watching, and yeah, have a great crafty day.